Usually when we look outside, we just see plants as this passive green backdrop, right? Just static scenery that doesn't really do much. But today, we're going to completely flip that perspective in this explainer. We're looking at plants not as passive objects, but as highly engineered, dynamic, living machines. By the time we wrap this up, I promise you're going to see every tree, bush, and blade of grass as an absolute marvel of biological engineering.
Here's the roadmap for our explainer today. We're going to start with the overall blueprint, then dig into roots as the engine, move up the stems, which are basically the plant's highway, check out leaves as solar factories, and finally look at some wild leaf modifications.
All right, let's jump right into Section 1, the blueprint, root and shoot. So, every plant body is fundamentally split into two primary domains. Down below, you've got the root system, which is entirely underground, handling all the subterranean operations. Then, up above, you have the shoot system. That's the aerial part of the plant existing above the soil. This shoot system acts as the scaffolding that holds up all the stems, branches, leaves, flowers, fruits, and buds. The whole shebang. What's really fascinating here are the totally opposing forces driving these two systems. The root system is the non-green, non-photosynthetic part. It has an absolute one-track mind. It grows downwards, straight toward gravity, constantly seeking out moisture and stability, far away from the light. But the shoot system, it does the exact opposite. It defies gravity, aggressively pushing upward and outward toward the light to power the plant. It's this perfect, continuous balancing act of below-ground anchoring and above-ground expansion. Moving on to Section 2, let's dig into the roots, the underground engine. Depending on the species, plants generally employ one of two main structural strategies for their root systems. On one side, we have the taproot system. You can think of this like a heavy-duty drill. It features a single, thick primary root that drives deep down into the soil, with smaller secondary roots branching off of it. You'll see this set up in plants like mustard or massive mango trees. On the flip side, we have the fibrous root system. Instead of one deep drill, this is more like throwing out a wide-spreading net. It's a cluster of almost equal-sized roots springing right from the base of the stem. This is super common. It's the standard for things like grasses and maize. Now, regardless of the specific type, these underground engines have some absolutely crucial jobs to do. First and foremost, they absorb water and nutrients from the soil using just countless tiny root hairs. Second, they act as an anchor, fixing the plant firmly in place against harsh wind and weather. And third, they actually help the wider environment by binding the topsoil together, which prevents soil erosion. Oh, and here's a fun fact for you. Roots can also act as food storage vaults. Seriously, when you eat a carrot or a radish, you're literally just eating a plant's swollen, nutrient-packed taproot.
All right, moving above ground to Section 3, stems, the plant's highway.
Let's take a look at how this highway is actually constructed on a typical shoot. Notice these specific points called nodes. These are the vital junctions where leaves, branches, and buds physically arise from the stem. Then, the stretches of smooth highway between those nodes, those are called internodes. And driving the new growth of this whole system are the buds. You've got the terminal buds sitting right at the very tip, pushing the plant taller and taller, while axillary buds sit in the leaf axils, just waiting to specialize into new leafy shoots or colorful flowers.
So, the big takeaway here is that the stem isn't just a stick. It is a highly functional piece of infrastructure. It provides the physical scaffolding that supports branches, leaves, and fruits. But it's actually a smart scaffold. It specifically orients those leaves to make sure they get the absolute maximum exposure to sunlight. More than just support, it's a literal two-way transport highway. It conducts water and minerals pulled up from the roots and then transports the food manufactured in the leaves back down to the rest of the plant. And just like roots, stems can be food vaults too. That potato you had for dinner last night? No way around it. That is a modified, swollen underground stem, not a root. Which brings us up to Section 4. Leaves, the solar factories. Every good factory needs a solid structure, right? Well, the leaf is no different. The leaf attaches to our stem highway via a stalk called the petiole. This stalk holds up the main event, the lamina, or leaf blade. This is the flat, green, expanded part of the leaf, the actual solar panel that traps the sun's energy using that famous green pigment, chlorophyll. Running right down the dead center of this lamina is a thick vein called the midrib. This gives the leaf structural support and houses the vital plumbing that brings water in and ships food out. Now, plants engineer these solar panels in two main ways. First, you have a simple leaf, which has a single undivided lamina. Think of a classic mango or peepal leaf. It's just one solid, continuous surface. But then you have the compound leaf.
In this design, the lamina is divided into many smaller leaflets, and those divisions reach all the way down to the midrib, which in this case is called a rachis. You'll see this highly fragmented, complex solar panel design in plants like roses or neem trees.
Having the panels is one thing, but how you arrange them matters immensely. Leaves don't just grow randomly. They are meticulously positioned on the stem to capture the absolute maximum amount of sunlight without overshadowing each other. In an alternate arrangement, like with the hibiscus, a single leaf arises at each node, creating this beautiful spiral pattern up the stem. Alternatively, we see an opposite arrangement, like in the guava plant, where two leaves arise right across from each other at the exact same node. It's all just a genius strategy to avoid overlap and maximize solar efficiency.
If we look inside the leaf factory, there's a really complex network of plumbing known as venation, which is just the arrangement of veins. And this reveals another major division in the plant kingdom. On one hand, dicot plants like the peepal or mango use reticulate venation. Their veins branch out irregularly, forming a complex, net-like web across the entire leaf. On the other hand, monocot plants like bananas and grasses use parallel venation. Here the veins run in neat, straight, parallel rows alongside each other.
Okay, so what is actually happening inside these perfectly engineered factories? It comes down to two massive processes. First, photosynthesis. The leaves take in carbon dioxide from the air, pull water from the soil, and using the energy of sunlight trapped by chlorophyll, they manufacture glucose, basic plant food. And a pretty wonderful byproduct of this process is the oxygen they release into the atmosphere, which, keeps us all alive. The second process is transpiration. Leaves have these tiny pores called stomata. Through these pores, the plant releases excess water into the air as vapor. Essentially, the plant is sweating. This helps pull more water up from the roots and cools the whole plant down.
And that leads us to our final section, Section 5, Beyond Basics, Leaf Modifications. You see, not all stems are strong enough to just stand upright on their own. Take a weak-stemmed climber like the pea plant. To get up to that crucial sunlight, it needs support, so it literally modifies its leaves, turning them into slender, sensitive, coiled structures called tendrils. When these tendrils bump into a support structure, like a fence or even another plant, they wrap around it incredibly tightly, helping the pea plant haul itself upward. The leaf literally goes from being a solar panel to a grappling hook.
Now, here is where things get wild. What happens when a plant lives in soil that is terribly deficient in nutrients, specifically nitrogen? Well, it has to find food somewhere else. Enter the insectivorous plants. These plants modify their leaves into deadly, highly sophisticated traps to hunt insects. The Venus flytrap uses these hinged, hair-triggered leaves that snap shut in a fraction of a second. But let's actually look a bit closer at the mechanics of the pitcher plant. The mechanics here are just ruthless. The leaf blade actually forms a deep pitcher filled with digestive fluid, and the leaf apex forms a little lid. The source material describes it like this. When an insect sits on the rim of the cupped pitcher, it gets trapped by the lid, slips inside, and is slowly digested to fulfill the plant's nitrogen requirements. It is an absolutely incredible, if slightly terrifying, evolutionary workaround.
But what about modifications for extreme heat? In certain acacia species, having big, broad leaves just means losing way too much water to transpiration. So, the plant's actual leaves just shrink and disappear entirely. But obviously, it still needs to photosynthesize, right? To solve this, the petioles, those leaf stalks we learned about earlier, they expand, flatten out, turn green, and essentially fake being leaves. These modified stalks are called phyllodes, and they just take over the entire job of photosynthesis. How cool is that?
Finally, leaves can even become the ultimate reproduction engines. Take a look at the bryophyllum leaf. Instead of relying purely on seeds, this plant practices vegetative propagation. It develops tiny little buds, called adventitious buds, right along the margins of its leaves. These buds actually grow their own tiny roots while still attached to the mother leaf. Eventually, they fall off, hit the moist soil, and grow into entirely new, independent plants. Basically, one single leaf acts as a literal plant nursery.
And that brings us to the end of our explainer today. We started out just looking at ordinary plants, but hopefully you now see the absolute genius in their design. The roots driving through the soil like drills, the stems acting as bustling two-way highways, the leaves functioning as perfectly angled solar factories, or even grappling hooks and insect traps. Next time you step outside and look at a simple green leaf, ask yourself, is it really just a leaf, or is it a factory, a trap, or the start of a whole new plant? Thanks for joining me on this explainer today. Keep observing and keep questioning the amazing biological machines all around us.